when you say misuse, are they using separation boards so that they don't have to go to a court martial in certain situations?
It's more pervasive than that. The Marine Corps is using admin set boards in cases where the evidence didn't warrant a court martial. And so here's the example that we're seeing. And I've got 3 current cases right now. 3. All Marine Corps, all staff NCOs, E7 or higher, all near retirement eligible or retirement eligible. So it all starts with OSTC, which we've talked about in length, which is the Office of the Special Trial Counsel, and sexual assault prosecutions. We all know that sexual assault prosecutions in the military are, the spotlight has been placed on sexual assault prosecutions and sexual assault prevention for at least the last 20 years, as long as I've been in this business. But there have been a lot of recent changes. In the last year or two, they've stood up what's called OSTC, which is the Office of the Special Trial Counsel, which in general has been a very positive thing for the military. The decision to prosecute sexual assault cases has been taken out of the hands of the chain of command, which is good, because what was happening before is every allegation of sexual assault, no matter how ludicrous it was, how preposterous it was, how asinine this was on its face, was getting prosecuted, because chain of commands didn't have the moral backbone, and the moral fortitude to say, no, they're not going to prosecute baseless cases. They were too concerned about promotions, prosecutorial oversight, congressional oversight, that they were just sending these cases to trial and then scratching their heads wondering why there's all these acquittals. And so OSTC stood up, which is the Office of the Special Trial Counsel. And what that did is they put the decision-making to prosecute sexual assault cases in the hands of prosecutors. It's like, oh, that makes sense. That's the same way it is in the DA's office or in the state office. Actual lawyers who are experienced can evaluate a case and make a determination if it's worth prosecuting, aka if it's a bogus case or not. Because if you have a real case of sexual assault, prosecute it. And let's see how this shakes out. But if you have something that's a false allegation or something that clearly can't be proven, you don't prosecute it. So OSTC has a standard. Do they have a good faith belief that they can obtain and sustain a conviction with relevant evidence and admissible evidence? And think about that. Maintain and sustain a conviction, that they have a good faith belief that if they take a case to trial, it's going to result in a conviction, and the conviction is not going to be overturned by an appellate court, which means you're not going to have a prosecutor doing something they shouldn't do at the lower level. And so what we're seeing now is a very good trend in prosecution. We're seeing a lot less cases of sexual assault go to a court martial. I see discretion being used appropriately. There are some very good OSTIC prosecutors, in particular in the Marine Corps, who look at a case and say, the case doesn't warrant a prosecution. We don't believe this case is valid. We don't believe we can obtain a conviction. Oftentimes these are false allegations where maybe they're not prosecuting the alleged victim, but they don't take these cases to trial. That is called a deferral, which means the OSTC defers the charges. It means they're not going to prosecute. And who does it get deferred to? It gets deferred back to the chain of command. And it's important to understand that once it's deferred to the chain of command cannot prosecute a covered offense. Remember, a covered offense is what's within the rubric or the jurisdiction of OSTC. Sexual assault, child offenses, domestic violence, those are the types of offenses that are covered offenses. So they can't touch them. So maybe if there was a sex assault allegation that involved fraternization, you have a gunny who was drinking with a PFC and they were in the same chain of command. They went out and maybe they had sex and she claimed sexual assault. Maybe there's nothing, maybe there was evidence to show that this sexual assault never occurred, but fraternization probably did. You shouldn't have a gunny and a PFC in the same chain of command drinking together. So if that case is deferred to the command, they can give NJP. They can even do a court martial for the fraternization. Okay. But oftentimes, probably the majority of the time, these cases are deferred and there's no other collateral misconduct. They're just deferred. So what happens is you get a really pissed off chain of command, because we all know that commands in the Marine Corps in particular, and the Army as well, can be very vindictive. We've talked about it in the past where allegations are made and you instantly go from a outstanding NCO to a shitbag overnight. And the command is pissed off. The command says, well, I can't believe OSTC or this lieutenant colonel or this major deferred the case. I think this actually happened. I'm sending the case to an administrative separation board. And so now what happens, instead of an administrative separation board being for what it was designed for, lower level misconduct, lower level offenses, we're seeing routinely senior NCOs, junior enlisted across the board get notified at an administrative separation for sexual assault. Which, if you just pause and think about that, it's kind of asinine or it's mind blowing to me, where a command is saying, we're notifying you, we believe you committed sexual assault. We're taking you to an administrative separation board for sexual assault. And now you have to defend yourself from sexual assault allegations that, oh, by the way, the prosecutors did not believe occurred. Otherwise, they would have charged it. And the prosecutors had no way of stopping that because they're totally separate.